Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for Arrow Season 3, Episode 6, Guilty. And I was definitely really looking forward to this episode. I mean, last week's episode ended on an amazing cliffhanger. I love last week's cliffhanger. I thought it was an amazing cliffhanger. Because, of course, last week we found out that Roy had that vision that he possibly killed Sara, and I was really interested in seeing how that was all going to play out. And this episode was just amazing. By far the best episode of the season. I loved it. And one of the things I definitely love about this episode is that the case in this episode was very serial drama-ish. It wasn't a procedural case. It is something that probably is going to continue. And I love this episode. I thought it was really, really good. And Colin Haynes, definitely his best performance on the show so far. I thought he was amazing in this episode. So let's just get to it. So we basically see they are in the middle of, basically, Arrow, Diggle, and Roy are in the middle of some sort of drug deal. You know, it's really weird. They're in the middle of something, and he's reliving the vision of him killing Sara, and he needs to snap out of it because they're about to bust a drug dealer. And you know, basically, Oliver walks into the abandoned warehouse where the deal's taking place, but it looks like someone else beat them to the punch. So Oliver finds the gang member strung upside down and dead in the next room, and Roy finds one word, and that word is guilty, written in blood on the warehouse floor. And that's the perfect word for Roy right now, because right now he feels very guilty. And I thought it was interesting the way that kind of played out with Roy's plot. I mean, it had nothing to do with, like, the blood writing had nothing to do with Roy, but that's how Roy feels right now. He feels very guilty for what he did, and I find that very interesting. So their only lead members in the murders is a gang member named Paco. And back at the base, Oliver and Diggle are trying to find Paco's whereabouts, and Roy wants to help, but Oliver tells him that he needs to rest and sharpen up because, you know, as we know, he's not been sleeping. He's been having a lot of sleeping issues, and Oliver pretty much thinks that he needs to take a little break from that. We know why he's having sleeping issues, though. So we go to a flashback, and we see that back in the past, Oliver and Mazzeo pursue Target. The Target tries escaping, but he's hit by a car and dies before providing the intel that Oliver and Mazzeo need. And Oliver tells Mazzeo that he couldn't get information out of while in pursuit, but Mazzeo corrects him. He says that Oliver has the info, but just doesn't know it yet. So later at Katana's home, Oliver plays a memory matching game with her son, and Mazzeo needs Oliver to remember what he said when pursuing their target. So once he does, then Mazzeo's mission will be complete, and they will be free of Amanda Waller and Oliver. So Katana helps Oliver jog his memory. She trains Oliver to strip the distractions in his mind, focus on what he saw, and with a clear head, Oliver finds what he's looking for. It's a name for another target with the necessary information. And Katana orders Oliver to leave her home. So in the present, Ted and Felicity are sparring in Ted's gym. And of course, you know, Ted now knows what, not Felicity, I mean Laurel. We now know what Laurel's motive is. So, you know, it was really cool to see this. So after the workout, the two go out to grab a bite to eat. And back at the Arrow base, Roy asks Felicity to test his blood again for Mirakuru. Because as we know, last season he had a lot of problems with that. And I actually forgot about the Mirakuru thing. It seemed like it happened, like, so long ago, because Season 2, you know, that happened last season where he had so many problems with the Mirakuru and controlling his anger and things like that. And I thought this was definitely very interesting. And a lot of people had the theory that the reason Roy might have killed Sara was because of him with the Mirakuru. Maybe he had the Mirakuru in him, and it did stuff to him, because as we know, the Mirakuru does stuff to you, and it does have a lot of side effects, and it makes you a different type of person. So maybe the Mirakuru did do something to him, and I thought that was definitely very interesting. So as Roy is resting, Arrow finds Paco's accomplice and possible lead on the guilty case, and Emilio Ortega, and he's tracing Emilio's phone signal, and he rushes over to his last location. And that's Grant's gym. And when he arrives, a man is strung upside down like the drug dealers in the warehouse, with guilty once again written in blood. So that was really weird. So then what happens is that Ted and Laurel enter the room, and Oliver points an arrow at Ted and accuses him for being the killer. And I thought this was really awesome, because Really, Oliver does not trust Ted at this point, and we don't know too much about Ted. By the way, Ted is going to end up being Wildcat. I don't know if, in case you guys care, in case you guys know that, I actually didn't know that. I found that out from comicbook.com, which is actually the recap I'm using right now, in case you guys care. But yeah, he's actually going to end up being Wildcat, which I think is going to be really cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. So basically, he does not trust him, but Laurel's providing the alibi that they were out eating. She's like, look, he had nothing to do with this. We were out eating. I have no idea what you're talking about. And I understand why Oliver doesn't really trust, Ted right now. Because, one, he doesn't know too much about him. Two, he's actually pretty much against Laurel, because he doesn't want her to avenge her sister's death. He doesn't think that she's as powerful as he is. But I don't know about that, because those leaked photos we saw of her as a Black Canary, I don't know if you guys saw that, but they are amazingly badass, and just, Kate Cassidy looks awesome. I mean, Laurel looks like she's gonna kill it as a Black Canary, and I can't wait for that. So Quinn asks Laurel why she's been seeing Ted, because of course he wants to know why she's suddenly so interested in fighting, because last season, Laurel was not like this at all. Laurel was a very defenseless person last season. She got on a lot of people's nerves. I know a lot of people hated Laurel, and that's why they changed her character so much, because people hated her last season. They wanted nothing to do with her. So, they changed her this season, and it makes sense why Quentin wants to know why Laurel's been doing this, why she's been seeing Ted. But all she says is that he's only his trainer, because, he thinks that maybe they're in a relationship or something. And when she leaves Ted's gym, she pleads Ted's innocence to Oliver, and Oliver doesn't trust Ted despite the alibi and warns Laurel to watch her back around Ted, because he doesn't really know if he trusts her, or if he trusts him right now. So, Felicity confirms that the Mirror Crew is indeed out of Roy's blood, but Roy is still unsettled because he's trying to figure out why would he have this random dream. He's not just randomly going to have a dream of killing Sara, okay? That's not like that. He's not me, okay? If you're wondering why I'm saying he's not me, because I have the most random dreams ever. I had a dream that I was in, this has nothing to do with the episode, I don't know why I'm talking about this, but I'm going to. I had a dream that I was in, like, the movie Click, and someone had a remote and fast-forward me. I had a dream that I saw a dead head, and this had nothing to do with anything, a dead head on the floor, talking about Clorox wipes, and he had Robin Williams' voice. I don't know why, but I did. Like, I have really fucked up dreams, and Roy is not like me, so, I mean, obviously, he has a reason for having dreams. I don't, but many people do. Most people do. I'm not normal, so it makes sense. So, he admits that he's actually been having the intense dreams of murdering Sara, claiming that they feel more like dreams. And, I thought that was really interesting. So, Felicity feels very uneasy about this information. She doesn't know how to feel about it, because she remembers what Roy was like with the Mirror Crew. If you remember, he almost killed Felicity last season. There was that episode, Seeing Red, where she just saw Roy, and he basically had, like, a whole rage about everything with the Mirror Crew, and she couldn't control him. And she knows how he was, so obviously she's very worried about this, definitely. So, Oliver and Diggle enter the Arrow base, where they discuss Ted's history as a prize fighter known as Wildcat, and the history of beating a man to death with brass knuckles. So this makes them very suspicious about Ted possibly being the one to commit these murders. So Felicity's tracker on Ted goes off, and Oliver follows his movement to the hideout, where he finds another body strung upside down with the bloody guilty. There are brass knuckles sitting on the nearby table, and then Ted enters the incriminating scene, and the two skirmish complete with a boxing glove, arrow shout-out, and Oliver asks how Ted could be innocent after he's found at two identical crime scenes. But Ted reiterates that he didn't kill the man. Why? Because he claims he used to be a vigilante. And I thought this was an awesome twist. I love this. Like, I would have never suspected this. I thought this was definitely very cool, in my opinion. We actually find out that Ted used to be a vigilante like Oliver. And he says that he only fought crime in the Glades 6 years ago, which is why nobody has ever heard of him. Because I myself was wondering, if he is this, like, wrestling, boxing prize fighter known as Wildcat, why has nobody ever heard of him? Like, why has no one ever heard of him? That definitely is very interesting why, he's like that. So I definitely like that we found out more about him. He's a character that we need to know more about. I mean, we can't just randomly introduce him and not know more about him. And I like that we are finding out a lot more about Ted's character, and I definitely really like that. So, basically he claims that he's being set up by a former enemy, and Grant says, he says that he and Oliver need to partner up to stop the old enemy, and Ted says that the stranger is leaving Ted a trail to follow, supposedly to a trap. So Felicity brings Flies and the lead suspect, who is a man named Massini, to Oliver and Ted, and the two head to his last known location, and then the back of the base, Felicity talks to Roy about Sarah's murder, and after conducting another autopsy on Sarah, she surmises that it would have been possible for someone to kill Sarah by throwing arrows into Sarah's chest, someone like Roy. Now, this definitely starts to make her very suspicious, because think about it. It makes sense if he did kill Sarah, because he could have. If he wanted to kill Sarah, he could have done it, because he had that arrow. He had the arrow. He could have flown into her chest. He could have very possibly killed her. It definitely makes sense, though, and I thought that was definitely very interesting, and I really like that Felicity said that, because it's making us very suspicious about him. And I, at this point, pretty much think that he did kill Sarah, but then I thought, would the show really make us turn against Roy this quickly? I mean, they had so much development with him last season of helping, Oliver and everything, and becoming his, sidekick and everything, and now they just abandon all that. Wouldn't make any sense, because that's like turning Robin against Batman. Like, you can't do that. So, I pretty much thought, okay, there definitely is something up here. I don't think that Roy really did it. So at the hideouts, Oliver and Ted confront Ted's old adversary, who's wearing Ted's old vigilante gear, and Arrow tries pursuing the masked villain, but the Starling City Police Department bursts the scene. The man flees. The police arrest Ted for a body found in his storage locker, and with the mission awash, Arrow, Diggle, and Laurel return to Verdant, and there Roy admits, and I thought this was great, and this really made me think, okay, there's no way he did it, because they found out so early, and if Roy would have really killed Sarah, this would have taken them time, because the show is in no way fast-paced. Arrow is not a fast-paced show. Arrow is a very slow-paced show. Think of how long it took for the Slade storyline to get going last year. Think about that. Arrow is a very slow-paced show. Is not a show that just reveals things like 1-2 like that. It's not a show like that. So, for them to just, for him to just straight out say it, I'm like, okay, there's no way he did it. Because they find out that Roy admits to the three that he killed Sarah. And he explains the repressed dreams, and Felicity explains that residual Mirakuru made him do it, so it's very possible that he could have. And, Oliver asks Felicity, do you really think he did it? And they're not sure. And Oliver lets Roy leave, but the rest of the teams don't know what to make of the news. They don't know, and it makes sense, because think about it. If you were on Team Arrow, and you had someone who you thought was very loyal to you, and you get word that they think that they killed Sarah, especially having Laurel there, who is pretty much just, ready to kill anyone who killed Sarah and will hurt them. She pretty much went to town on that one guy in episode 3, so we know what she can do, and we know what she's capable of. So, pretty much, she will kill Roy. She will do something to Roy if we find out what happens are. So I thought that was definitely a very well done scene. I definitely really did enjoy that. So Felicity's DNA tests and forensic evidence are still too inconclusive. And Oliver tells Felicity to focus on the case at hand, and if Roy did kill Sarah, they will deal with it when they know for sure, and I think that's good that he said that, because that's what they need to do, because they don't know anything yet, nothing is confirmed, and if he really didn't do it, they're going to regret it, because if he did do it, then maybe they would go after him, but they're not going to yet, because they don't really know if he did it. So in private, Diggle tells Oliver that they may have to cut Roy loose. They may just have to get him out of Team Arrow, because if he did do this, then he betrayed them, and they can't forgive him. Because if I was Oliver, and I found out that Roy did it, I wouldn't forgive him. So at Starling City Police Department, Laurel stops her father's interrogation of Ted, but Felicity tells Ted, basically Laurel tells Ted that if she is to help him, he needs to tell her everything he knows, and Ted reveals that the masked man's identity is Isaac Stanzler. This is the guy who did it. And this was very interesting. And I'm kind of wondering if something is going to happen here, and this kind of maybe predicting something. Because we find out that Isaac was Ted's old assistant. Basically, think of how Diggle is to Oliver. That's basically how Isaac was to Ted. So, I'm kind of wondering if this is going to foreshadow that maybe Diggle's going to one day turn against Oliver. I don't know if he would. Could never see Diggle doing something like that, but you never know. I mean, if this happened to Ted, imagine what could happen to Oliver. He basically reveals that the relationship soared 6 years ago when Isaac, not Ted, killed the drug dealer with brass knuckles. It was him that did it. And he retired crime fighting afterward. And it's enough to let Ted walk as he and Laurel exit the police department. Isaac gets the drop on them. He takes the two of them hostage, swearing revenge on Ted for abandoning him. And Laurel is able to dial Felicity in secret as she is forced to drive them to the unknown location. So a signal on the three. Oliver and Roy track Felicity's car on their motorcycles. Sorry, guys. I keep saying Felicity, but it's Laurel. I don't know why they said Felicity. They made a mistake here on this recap. So after a brief on-road skirmish, Laurel crashes the car, and Isaac pulls himself out of the car, fights Roy while Oliver puts Laurel to safety. And in their fight, Isaac whispers poison to Roy, and Isaac says that Arrow will abandon Roy just like Ted abandoned him. And I thought that was very interesting because that really got me thinking here. And again, I love how they're connecting this to everything that's going on with Roy. And the show doesn't really do that a lot. They don't really, a lot of times, connect the procedural element to the serial drama part of it. They don't really do that. And I thought it was really cool that they did that because what that did was, this episode did two very important things. One, it furthered Ted's character, but also, Roy is a suspect right now of who killed Sara. So it's really interesting that he said that, and I definitely really enjoyed that. So Roy says that he's nothing like Isaac and subdues him. With Isaac down, Oliver promises Roy that he will never abandon him, and that was really awesome when that happened. So Oliver visits Ted as Jimmy, tells Ted to stay away from Felicity, but he says that decision is up to her, and I agree. If she wants to get this training, let her, okay? It's really not Oliver's decision anymore. It's not, and I understand that Oliver wants to protect her and doesn't want her to hurt herself and thinks that she is not as strong as her sister, but he doesn't know what kind of damage Laurel can do, okay? He doesn't realize how powerful and how full of rage she is right now. Okay, the condition that Laurel's in, she is handling this perfectly, in my opinion. I would be fine with the way she's handling it. I don't know why Oliver has such a problem with it. So Ted warns Oliver one very important thing. He says, never lose Roy. And I thought that was great that he said that, because basically Oliver counters that Ted never lost Isaac, but lost faith in him. And that is true if you think about it. He lost faith in him, basically, and that's why he turned against him. And Oliver's not going to do that to Roy. This one he realizes he can't lose faith in Roy. He can't just let him go. And I thought that was very well done because, of course, Diggle had told him before, maybe we might have to let him go. But Oliver's like, no, I'm not going to end up like that. So he goes back to the Vernon base where he tells Roy to retire, that he needs to retire his Arsenal persona. And Roy says he's turning himself into the police, and that was huge. But before he lets Roy do so, he employs the same memory clearing technique that Katana used on him. And I loved, this was the other thing I loved, they related the flashbacks to what's going on with Roy, which I thought was really awesome. So he's hoping to uncover hidden truths in Roy's mind, and he clears his head. And this was just amazing. I thought this was amazing when we found out. We actually find out what he's seeing. It turns out that he didn't kill Sara. He instead killed a police officer the first night he was on Mirakuru back in Season 2. And I thought that was just an awesome twist that he did that. And just the way that scene was handled was so well done. Because you can see the reaction on Roy's face. He's like, oh shit, I killed a police officer. I don't know what's going to happen. And he said he knew that he stabbed the officer with the arrow, but never knew that he killed him. And Oliver says that he withheld the information from Roy, not wanting to upset him in his fragile state, because he knew that he, stabbed him, but he didn't know that he killed this cop. And given the similar manner that Roy killed the cop and Sara was murdered with arrows, it explains why he's had such confusing dreams, because he pretty much thinks that he's guilty here. And he's telling him he's innocent, but he doesn't really feel innocent. So I like seeing this conflict with Roy. I'm wondering how this is going to be handled because I don't think Roy really trusts himself right now. I think Roy is very worried. You know, he's now off the Mirakuru, so I don't think he has anything to worry about, but I think he does not trust himself. He really doesn't, and I really feel bad for Roy, definitely. But it makes Roy such a more interesting character, and probably after this episode, Roy might be my favorite, I gotta say. I mean, they've made Roy just such an interesting character this season. I love what they're doing with his character, and the direction they're going is just amazing. So, we get to the final scene at Ted's gym, and Felicity visits Ted, and she asks him to further her training, and even wants to be his new partner. And Ted accepts, so they're possibly going to end up working together. What I'm wondering is Ted going to go back to being a vigilante? Because I kind of feel like what's going to happen is Oliver doesn't want to work with Felicity. Felicity told him, Laurel. Laurel told him explicitly that she does not want to be on Team Arrow. She said that. She said, I am not a part of Team Arrow. I'm never going to be. What I think is that she's going to end up working with Ted, and she's going to become his new assistant and his new sidekick. So, if that ends up happening, I think it's going to be really cool, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. Because, again, this is all leading up to Laurel becoming Black Canary. So across town, Isaac is escorted between prisons, but once he and his 2 escorting officers are out in the open, they are shot down with arrows, and they belong to a female archer who calls herself Cupid, and she's like, I'm Cupid, stupid. And next week's episode looks so funny, because apparently this girl is apparently in love with Oliver. Like, she has very deep feelings for Oliver, she really likes him, and she's going to do whatever she can to try to get to him, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. I think that's going to be hilarious, and I love that plot. I think it's going to be definitely very, very funny, in my opinion. But overall, guys, this episode was amazing. I love the way they connected pretty much everything to what was going on with Roy in this episode. They even connected the flashbacks a little bit, which they really haven't done, and I haven't really been into the flashbacks as much this season, but I was into them, definitely, just not as into them as much as I am with everything else. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, do you guys think that Ted and Laurel are going to end up teaming up and Ted's going to become a vigilante again? I mean, it makes sense if he does. Being with Oliver and seeing that Oliver and Roy is such a strong bond, I'm thinking that he is going to try to, get back to being a vigilante, because I think that really is what Ted wants to do, and I really hope that that does happen to him, because I like Ted as a character. I think he's a very interesting character, and it makes him definitely much more interesting. No really major development with Quentin and Laurel about the whole killing Sara thing. She's eventually gonna tell him, but I'm pretty sure she's not gonna tell him till the mid-season finale. Roy, I really felt bad for Roy in this episode because he has all this rage built up inside of him. He doesn't trust himself, and I really hope that he does, because he needs to realize that, yeah, he is innocent. And yes, he did a bad thing by killing a police officer, but that's only because he was on the Mirakuru, which makes you do screwed up things and turns you into a screwed up person. So he wasn't himself when he did it, and he needs to realize that, and I really hope that Roy takes that into account, because if he takes that into account, then he'll realize, okay, I screwed up, it's fine, but I can get over it. I don't really know if Roy's going to get over this, because I still feel he's going to end up turning himself in because he killed a police officer, but if he does it now, it's like, what's the point of that? So, I'm wondering what definitely is going to happen there. Who do you think killed Sara? We still don't know who killed Sara. So I don't know who did it. I guess we'll just have to see. I still kind of feel like Ray Palmer's a suspect. We didn't see any of him in this episode, so maybe not really. Honestly, he's just becoming sort of a fun character, so I don't know. But still, he gave that very grimacing look in episode 3, so I still don't know. I still kind of feel like he could be a possibility. That's just me, though. I just feel like, there is a part of me that feels like he could be, a possibility. No Thea in this episode, which I was fine with, because I like Thea and Malcolm's plot overall, but this episode needed to focus on just Roy and Oliver and the way their whole thing is going on. Do you think that maybe Roy and Oliver are ever going to end up like Ted and Isaac? I don't think they're going to. I think pretty much they are tight. I think this episode proves that those two are tight and they have a bond that can't be broken. And they're going to make sure that that does not happen to them. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. And I guess that's pretty much it, guys. But overall, guys, love this episode. By far best episode of the season. I thought it was definitely the strongest so far. I absolutely loved it. Colton Haynes in this episode, gotta applaud him. He was amazing, definitely. Let me know what you guys saw this episode, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for tonight's episode of American Horror Story Freak Show. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.